I'm Dr. Shweta Chaudhary, Assistant Professor in Mewar University. In this, we will be learning about perception under organization behavior. So first, I would like to give you a brief introduction about the perception. Perception basically refers to the process by which individuals organize, identify, and even interpret sensory information and to understand the world around them. Okay, so it is how we see, hear, touch, or even smell and taste the world, but it is more than just sensory input. It involves interpreting that input. For example, if you see a cup of coffee, the sensory data includes the shape and its color and its smell of the coffee, sorry. But the perception, what you make of it, that whether it is just a cup of coffee or whether you associated it with relaxation or energy. Its key concept is basically the perception is not just about sensory data, but how we process and assign meaning to data. We interpret things based on previous experience, emotion, and expectation, which means two people might perceive the same situation differently. For example, we can say that the same movie can be perceived as exciting by one person and boring by another. So, depending upon their interest and past experience, perception happens. It has various importance. The first is it helps in like for example, perception for decision making. Like our decision are influenced by how we perceive situation. For example, a manager decide decision on hiring might be influenced by how they perceive a candidate, whether should be qualified or he should not be qualified. And we can take it as a communication also, because perception affects how we interpret message, body language, and tone of voice. Misunderstanding can occur if one person perceives something different than intention. And relationship, how we perceive other influence how we interact with them, build trust or creating conflict. Now we will uh, discuss about the perception process. It involves three steps. First is selection, then organization, and then interpretation. So the first of all, we will discuss about the selection. This is basically the first step where we decide which sensory inputs are worth focusing on. Give that there is a huge amount of information available at any given moment. Like our brains have to filter out irrelevant data and focus on what important is. Like again, we will take an example, like walking through a busy street, you might ignore the background noisy and focus only on the voices of your friend calling your name. Okay, now we will discuss organization, the second step in perception process. Like once sensory data is selected, we organize it to recognizable pattern. We group similar information together to make sense of the world. This involves categorizing the input into a meaningful group. Again, we will takes its example. Like if you see a person wearing a uniform, your mind immediately organize that data as someone associated with a particular job or role, like police officer as a or a server. Then the third step in perception process is interpretation. This is the step where we assign meaning to the organized data. Interpretation involves our cognition framework, such as our values, past experience, and knowledge, which influences how we assign meaning to the information. Example, hearing a car horn could be interpreted in various ways. Could be warning, a danger sign of impatience, or even a friendly gesture, depending upon the context and our past experience with our car horn. There are factors affecting perception, like physical factors. Physical aspect like age, health affects our ability to perceive stimuli. For instance, older adult may have diminished vision or hearing, which alters how they perceive their environment. For example, a person with a poor eyesight might misinterpret someone's facial expression due to blurry vision. Then the second is psychological factor, which which are you can see emotions are there, motives are there, and past experience. Like our emotional state and past experience influences how we perceive things. A person feeling anxious may interpret a neutral event like sight frown as a single sign of hostile. Again, we will take an example like someone who had a bad experience with dog in the past may perceive a friendly dog as threatening. Then we will discuss the third factor is social factor, like cultural background or cultural influences. Like cultural and societal norms shape how we perceive other. What is considered polite in one culture may be perceived as rude in another. Uh, For example, eye contact may be interpreted as respect in some culture, as at the same time disrespect in other culture. Then the last one is, or the last factor of perception influences cognitive factor, attention, memory, or mental framework. This, like our brain capacity for attention and how we store and recall information, influences perception. We often rely on mental shortcuts to make sense to a word quickly, but these can lead to biased perception. Again, we will take an example like if we have a schema or successful business people as always being confident, we may automatically perceive someone as competent based on their confidence, and even in their experience doesn't align. Now we will discuss the perception bias. Basically, perception bias are systematic patterns of deviation from norms or rational judgment, which can lead to inaccurate or incomplete perception. The common biases are halo effect. Halo effect we can generalize as individual overall impression based on one's positive or negative trait. For example, if someone is physically attractive, we may assume they are also smart, kind, and capable. The second one is stereotyping. Like we categorize people into group based on certain traits, often ignoring individual differences. This can be based on gender, race, age, or other factor. There are attribution biases also. When explaining other person's behavior, we tend to overemphasize internal factor, example personality, and underestimate external factors like situation and environment. Again, I will give you an example like if someone is late, we might assume they are lazy. This is internal attribution rather than considering that they could have delayed due to traffic, which is an external attribution. Now we will discuss the person's perception. Basically, person perception is the process of forming impression and making judgment about other based on their characteristics, behavior, and appearance. The component of a person perception is first one is physical appearance. We often judge other based on their looks, which can include their clothing, features, and and overall grooming. For example, a well-dressed person may be perceived as professional or contented regardless of their actual habits or ability. Then we have this non-verbal cues like body language, facial expression, and gesture provide insight into how we perceive a person, emotion, or intention. Again, we will take an example like a crossed arm may be interpreted as defensive or hostile, while smiling may signals as friendly. As in behavior, so in a person's action and words can shape our perception of them, how someone interact with other, and how they solve problem or how they handle stress can influence our judgment. Like for example, if someone is constantly helping others, we may perceive them as a kind and generous. The role of first impression in person's perception is, first of all, we will discuss the importance of first impression. The first impression are powerful because they set the tone of the future interaction, and they can create biases that influence how we perceive and behave towards others. For example, a first encounter with a person who appears friendly and confident can lead us to a view them more favorable, and even if we don't know them well. The first effect, or we can say the effect of first impression, is once formed, first impression are hard to change. Our brain tend to focuses on confirming our initial judgment even if new information contradict them. For example, if we met someone who seemed standoffish at first, we may continue to view them at distance even if the later show kindness. Now, in this slide, we will discuss about the factors affecting person perception. First is cultural background. Different cultural context shapes how we interpret behavior. For instance, direct eye contact may be a sign of respect in some culture but seen as rude in other. The second one is self-perception. How we view ourselves impact how we perceive others. If we have a negative self-image, we may be more likely to perceive others negatively as well. An exception or prejudice. So preconceived notion and bias based on gender, races, or even on social status can show how we perceive others and lead to distortion judgment. And the last one is context. The situation or environment in which we met someone can influence how we perceive them. A person might act differently in a casual setting than in a formal one. In this, we will discuss about improving person's perception because it's very needed. Awareness of the bias, being conscious of our biases is the first step to overcome them. Recognizing that our perception can skewed by stereotypes or prejudice allow us to avoid making unfair judgment. Open-mindedness. Approaching others with an open mind helps reduce the likelihood of quick judgment based on limited information. Then it is feedback and reflection. It is basically seeking feedback from others. Reflection on our judgment can help us becoming more aware of errors in our perception. Then last one is empathy. Understanding others' emotion and perception can lead to more accurate and compassionate perception of them. Now, finally, I would like to conclude that the perception is a complex process that is influenced by a variety of factors, and understanding how perception form can help us avoid biases and improve our interaction with others. And finally, I would like to say that the perception is the reflection of how we see the world, and so it is crucial to approach each person and situation with open mindedness and understanding to avoid misjudgment. Thank you.